I just made fresh snickerdoodles for Tyler and Maddie. Make sure you tell your brother to come by tomorrow so they can have some while they're still warm. Mom chirped through the phone as I watched my own kids, Emma and Liam, rummaging through my parents' empty refrigerator. It was always the same story, different chapter. My children were hungry after the 2-hour drive to Millbrook, a quaint suburb of Columbus that most people couldn't point to on a map. Meanwhile, my parents' kitchen, usually bursting with homemade treats when my brother Jake's kids visited, contained nothing but condiments, wilted lettuce, and expired yogurt when my children came to visit. "Mom, there's nothing here again," Emma whispered, her 9-year-old shoulders slumping as she closed the refrigerator door. Liam, at 7, was still checking the pantry with hopeful eyes, even though we both knew what he'd find. Nothing meant for them, anyway. "Don't worry about us, Mom," I replied, keeping my voice even despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "We actually ate before we came. The kids aren't hungry." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but not as bitter as watching my children realize, yet again, that they somehow mattered less than their cousins. "Oh, good," she said, obviously relieved. "I've been so busy this week, I just didn't have time to prepare anything. You understand, right, Allison?" I understood perfectly. She'd always have time for Jake's kids, just not mine. "Sure, Mom, we're fine." I hung up and turned to Emma and Liam, who were watching me with those patient eyes that broke my heart a little more each time. "How about we stop for pizza on the way home?" I suggested, already calculating how this unplanned expense would stretch our already tight budget. "But we just got here," Emma pointed out, confusion clouding her face. She was old enough to notice the pattern, but still young enough to hope it might change. "I know, sweetheart, but I forgot I have some work to finish tonight." Another lie to shield them from the truth, that their grandparents didn't value them enough to stock a single snack they enjoyed, while their cousins got fresh-baked cookies and favorite meals prepared days in advance. As we pulled out of my parents' driveway after a visit that lasted less than 30 minutes, I caught my mother's face in the window. She was frowning, phone already to her ear. Probably calling Jake to complain about how I never stay long enough, how I'm keeping her grandchildren away from her. She'd never understand that it was her own actions pushing us away. The next day, my phone exploded with texts from my brother. "Mom says you're trying to keep the kids from them." "Yo, what's your problem?" "They're getting older and won't be around forever, you know." I stared at the screen, years of buried resentment bubbling to the surface. My brother had always been the golden child, his accomplishments celebrated, his failures forgiven. I'd been fighting for equal treatment my entire life, and now I was watching history repeat itself with our children. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was Emma's dejected expression when she saw the empty fridge. Maybe it was the way Liam had stopped asking when we were going to visit Grandma and Grandpa. Or maybe after 34 years, I was finally tired of accepting the unacceptable. My fingers hovered over the phone. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my children, and the message they were receiving every time we visited. You don't matter as much. You aren't worth the effort. It was time to break the cycle, even if it meant being labeled the difficult daughter, the troublemaker, the one who turned the children against them. It was time to fight back. The breaking point had been building for years, but it crystallized on Emma's birthday last month. We'd driven to my parents' house for a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just cake and presents. Mom had promised to make Emma's favorite chocolate layer cake, the same one she'd made for every single one of Tyler's birthdays. "I can bring the cake," I'd offered, knowing from experience to have a backup plan. "Don't be silly," Mom had insisted. "I'm her grandmother. Of course I'm making her cake." When we arrived, there was no cake, not even a store-bought one. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Mom had said, not looking particularly sorry at all. "I just got so busy with the church bake sale. I completely forgot. We can still sing to her, though." Emma had put on a brave face, but I'd seen the tears she'd blinked back. Later that night, as I tucked her into bed, she'd asked in a small voice, "Does Grandma not like me as much as Tyler?" "Of course, she loves you," I'd assured her, the words hollow even to my own ears. "Then why does she always forget about me and Liam?" I'd had no answer then. But now, staring at my brother's accusatory text, I finally found my voice. I didn't respond to Jake. Instead, I called my mother directly. "Allison, is everything okay?" she answered, surprise evident in her tone. I rarely called outside our scheduled Sunday check-ins. "No, Mom, everything is not okay," I said, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "I need to talk to you and Dad about something important. Can I come over tomorrow? Without the kids?" There was a pause. "Is this about yesterday? Jake said you seemed upset." "Tomorrow at 2, Mom. It's important." Another pause. "All right, we'll be here." I hung up, my hands shaking. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to confront my parents about their favoritism. Not with angry accusations or tearful pleas. Those had never worked in the past. This time, I had evidence. I had a plan. I spent that night compiling everything. Photos of birthday celebrations, elaborate ones for Tyler and Maddie, perfunctory ones for Emma and Liam, text messages where I'd reminded my mother of my children's food allergies, only to arrive and find dishes they couldn't eat. The receipts for the presents I'd bought for my niece and nephew, alongside the dollar store trinkets my parents had given my children for the same occasions. And most damning of all, I had Emma's journal. She'd started keeping it last year, documenting each visit to her grandparents with heartbreaking clarity. Grandma made Tyler's favorite mac and cheese again. There was none left for me and Liam. Grandma said she didn't know we were coming, but Mom told me she called her yesterday to tell her. Emma had given me permission to show her journal to my parents. "Maybe if they know they're hurting us, they'll stop," she'd reasoned with a wisdom beyond her years. My smart, sensitive daughter, still trying to see the best in people who'd repeatedly shown her she wasn't a priority. The next day, I dressed carefully, not too formal, but put together enough to show I meant business. My husband Mark offered to come with me, but I declined. This was my battle to fight. He'd been telling me for years that my parents' behavior was unacceptable, but I'd always made excuses for them. Not anymore. When I arrived at their tidy ranch house in Millbrook, both my parents were waiting in the living room, their expressions a mix of confusion and defensiveness. "What's this all about, Allison?" my father asked as I set my folder of evidence on the coffee table between us. "Your mother says you've been acting strange." "I want to talk about why I've stopped bringing Emma and Liam over as often," I said, meeting their eyes directly. "I want to talk about why they don't feel welcome here." "That's ridiculous," my mother huffed. "We're their grandparents. Of course they're welcome." "Are they?" I opened my folder and pulled out the first photo, Tyler's 8th birthday last year. A homemade banner, balloons, a table laden with food, and a cake that must have taken hours to decorate. Next to it, I placed a photo from Liam's 8th birthday 3 months later. No decorations. A store-bought cake with his name misspelled. "This is just one example," I continued, my voice remaining calm even as my father shifted uncomfortably and my mother's lips pressed into a thin line. "I have dozens more. Different treatment, different effort, different love shown to your grandchildren based solely on which one of your children they came from. That's not fair," my mother protested. "We love all our grandchildren equally." "Maybe you do, but that's not what you show them." I placed Emma's journal on the table. "This is how your granddaughter sees her relationship with you. This is what she's learning about her worth from the way you treat her." My father picked up the journal, his face paling as he read Emma's neat handwriting. "Grandpa took Tyler fishing again. He said maybe next time for Liam, but he said that last time too." We didn't realize," he murmured, looking genuinely distressed. My mother, however, went on the offensive. "So you're keeping track of every little thing, tallying up what we do for each child like it's some kind of competition? That's sick, Allison. And now you're turning Emma against us by encouraging this scorecard?" I took a deep breath, refusing to rise to the bait. Emma started this journal on her own, and it's not about keeping score. It's about consistent patterns that are hurting my children. "Well, maybe if you visited more often." "We visited every weekend for 3 months last summer, Mom." Nothing changed. There were never groceries for my kids. Their favorite shows were never allowed on TV. Their accomplishments were barely acknowledged, while Tyler and Maddie's smallest achievements got celebrated with parties. I pulled out more evidence. Text messages where I'd told them about Emma's spelling bee win, met with a cursory, "That's nice," followed by my mother's gushing texts about Tyler's participation ribbon in a swim meet. "This isn't about me," I continued. "This is about Emma and Liam feeling like they matter to you. And right now, they don't feel that way." My father looked genuinely troubled, but my mother was building up to one of her famous defensive explosions. "So what are you saying? That we're terrible grandparents? That we don't love them? I'm saying you're showing clear favoritism and it's damaging my children. I'm saying something needs to change, or we won't be coming over anymore." The words hung in the air between us. I'd never made such a direct threat before. In my parents' world, family obligations trumped everything, including basic respect. "You would keep our grandchildren from us?" my mother asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Over some perceived slight?" "This isn't a slight, Mom. This is years of consistent behavior." I gestured to the evidence spread across the table. "And yes, if it continues, I will limit your access to Emma and Liam, because my job as their mother is to protect them, even if it's from the pain caused by their own grandparents." "This is Jake's doing, isn't it?" she deflected. "He's always been jealous of your relationship with us. He's turning you against us." The absurdity of her statement, flipping reality so completely, might have made me laugh if it wasn't so infuriating. Jake, the golden child, jealous of me? It was classic Mom, rewriting history to make herself the victim. "This has nothing to do with Jake," I said firmly. "This is about Emma and Liam deserving the same love and attention you give Tyler and Maddie." "We don't play favorites," my mother insisted, but her voice lacked conviction as my father continued to flip through Emma's journal, his expression growing more pained with each page. "The evidence suggests otherwise." I gestured to the table between us. "And I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for equal treatment." My father finally looked up, his face ashen. "Barb," he said quietly to my mother, "she's right. Look at this." He passed her the journal, opened to a page where Emma had written about Christmas last year. "Grandma got Tyler a new iPad. She got me fuzzy socks. She spent $500 on Tyler and $12 on me." I Googled the prices. My mother scanned the page, her defensive posture faltering slightly. We didn't realize she was noticing these things." "She's 9, not blind," I said, keeping my voice level. "Children notice everything, especially when it comes to fairness, and this isn't fair." A heavy silence fell over the room. For the first time, I could see my words penetrating the defensive wall my parents had built around their behavior. My father looked genuinely remorseful. My mother, though still resistant, seemed at least momentarily lost for excuses. "What do you want from us?" my father finally asked. "I want you to acknowledge the problem. I want you to make a conscious effort to treat all your grandchildren equally. And most importantly, I want you to understand that if things don't change, we won't be coming around as often." "You're holding your children hostage," my mother accused, finding her footing again. "No, I'm teaching them that they deserve to be treated with consideration and respect, and that they don't have to accept being treated as less than." I gathered my evidence back into the folder. "I've said what I came to say. The ball is in your court now." I stood up, feeling lighter than I had in years. Whether they changed or not, I'd finally stood up for my children. I'd finally stopped making excuses for behavior that had been hurting me since my own childhood. "We love you, Allison," my father said, looking suddenly older and smaller. "And we love Emma and Liam." "Then show them," I replied simply. "That's all they're asking for." I left them sitting in their living room, surrounded by the evidence of their years of favoritism. As I drove home, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt determined. This wasn't the end of the battle. My mother especially wouldn't change overnight, if at all. But it was the beginning of something important. My refusal to accept the unacceptable, not just for myself, but for my children. The following week passed in tense silence. No calls from my parents, though Jake texted several times, demanding to know what I'd said to upset them so badly. I didn't respond. This wasn't about him, though I suspected my mother was spinning some victim narrative with him at the center. Then on Friday afternoon, a text from my mother. "We'd like to have Emma and Liam over tomorrow for lunch. Just them, if that's okay with you." I stared at the message, suspicion warring with hope. Was this a genuine olive branch? Or an attempt to get my children alone to paint me as the villain? I showed the text to Mark. What do you think? He frowned, as wary as I was. Ask Emma and Liam if they want to go, but make it clear they can call us anytime to pick them up. When I asked the kids, their reactions surprised me. Emma was cautiously optimistic. Maybe they listened to what I wrote in my journal, she suggested. Liam, always more forgiving, was excited at the prospect of spending time with his grandparents without the overshadowing presence of his cousins. I texted back a tentative agreement, adding that I would drop them off and pick them up myself. If my parents were planning to interrogate my children about our home life or plant seeds of resentment, they wouldn't have long to do it. The next morning, as we pulled into my parents' driveway, I gave Emma and Liam both a hug. Remember, you can call me anytime and I'll come get you right away. And you don't have to eat anything you don't want to. We know, Mom, Emma said, rolling her eyes in that preteen way she'd recently perfected. We'll be fine. I watched them walk to the door, where my mother greeted them with hugs that seemed, from a distance at least, genuine. As I drove away, I tried to quiet the anxiety gnawing at my stomach. Had I made the right decision? Was I using my children as pawns in my own battle with my parents? 3 hours later, when I returned to pick them up, I braced myself for tears or tension. Instead, I found Emma and Liam in the kitchen with my parents, all 4 of them dusted in flour, laughing as they decorated cookies. Mom, Liam called when he saw me. Grandma taught us how to make snickerdoodles, and they're really good. Emma's smile was more reserved but real. And Grandpa fixed my bike chain, she added. He says next weekend he can take me and Liam fishing. I looked at my parents, trying to read between the lines. My father met my gaze steadily, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. My mother was harder to read, but there was something different in the way she interacted with Emma and Liam, a deliberateness that suggested she was making a conscious effort. We thought maybe you'd like to stay for dinner, my father offered tentatively. Barbara made a lasagna, with the vegetarian option for Liam that you mentioned. The small detail, remembering Liam's recent declaration that he was never eating meat again, caught me off guard. It was such a simple thing, but it showed they'd been listening. We'd like that, I said quietly. Dinner wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, moments where old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there were also new efforts. My mother asking Emma about her science project, my father talking to Liam about his soccer team, without once comparing him to Tyler. As we were leaving, my mother pulled me aside. We're trying, Allison, she said, her voice lacking its usual defensive edge. I can't promise we'll get everything right, but we're trying. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of the years of favoritism. But it was a start. A small step toward healing wounds that had been festering for generations. That's all I'm asking for, I replied. In the car on the way home, Emma was unusually quiet. Everything okay, sweetheart? I asked, catching her eyes in the rearview mirror. Yeah, she said slowly. It was different today. Good different. Grandma actually listened when I talked, and she didn't mention Tyler or Maddie once. That's great, I said, feeling a cautious optimism blossom. Mom? Emma's voice was thoughtful. Did you say something to them about how they treat us? I considered how to answer. What was appropriate to share with a 9-year-old about adult confrontations and family dynamics? In the end, I settled on the simplest truth. Yes, I did. I told them that everyone deserves to be treated with love and respect, especially by family, and that includes you and Liam. She nodded, processing this. Thank you, she said finally, for standing up for us. My heart swelled with a complicated mix of pride, love, and lingering sadness that it had been necessary at all. Always, I promised. I will always stand up for you. The journey wasn't smooth after that. There were setbacks, my mother falling into old habits, my father taking the path of least resistance. There were tense phone calls and tearful conversations. Jake accused me of trying to monopolize our parents' attention and resources, unable to see the irony in his complaint. But there were also victories. 3 months after our confrontation, my parents threw Emma a belated birthday party. Not extravagant, but thoughtful, with decorations in her favorite colors and a homemade cake that wasn't burnt or lopsided. They remembered Liam's shellfish allergy at Easter dinner and prepared a separate dish just for him. Small steps, imperfect progress. but progress nonetheless. The real change, though, was in me. I stopped accepting scraps of affection and started expecting, demanding, better treatment for my children and myself. I stopped making excuses for behavior that hurt us. And most importantly, I showed Emma and Liam that they didn't have to accept being treated as less than, even by family. 1 year after our confrontation, we celebrated Thanksgiving at my parents' house. All of us together. My family, Jake's family, my parents. The old tensions weren't gone completely, but they had faded enough that we could share a meal without walking on eggshells. After dinner, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my mother, both of us loading the dishwasher in companionable silence. "I saved the leftover pumpkin pie for Emma to take home," she said casually. I remember she said it was her favorite. Such a small thing, such an ordinary gesture of grandmotherly affection. And yet, a year ago, it would have been unthinkable. Any leftovers would have been reserved for Tyler and Maddie without question. "Thank you," I said, meaning it for more than just the pie. My mother nodded, understanding in her eyes. We weren't perfect. Our relationship would never be the Hallmark movie version of mother-daughter bonds. But we were trying. All of us were trying. Later that night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she said something that made all the difficult conversations, all the standing my ground, worth it. "I like going to Grandma and Grandpa's house now," she yawned, snuggling into her pillow. "It feels like they actually want us there." "They do, sweetheart," I assured her, believing it for the first time. "They absolutely do." As I turned out her light and closed her door, I realized that this was the true victory. Not that my parents had finally started treating my children equally, but that my children now knew they deserved nothing less. That lesson would serve them for a lifetime, long after freshly baked cookies and fishing trips were distant memories. And for me, the victory was in finally breaking a cycle that had been spiraling through generations of our family. In showing my children that love shouldn't come with conditions or comparisons. That true family means everyone has a place at the table and equal access to whatever's in the fridge.